team behind Marvel's Midnight Suns are best known for XCOM, the stellar tactical strategy series about sending squads of elite soldiers against an invading alien force, and often watching those soldiers die horrifically. The logical pitch for Midnight Suns, then, is XCOM, but with superheroes. But in fact, the new Marvel title from developer Firaxis Games is much more RPG than strategy game. This isn't another XCOM, it's something very different. As Firaxis notes, Midnight Suns focuses on some of the more spooky elements of the Marvel Universe, including its more arcane heroes. The initial premise is pretty standard. The evil military group Hydra uses some occult weirdness to resurrect a supervillain named Lilith, the Mother of Demons, and starts aiding her in taking over the world. To combat that threat, characters like Doctor Strange and Iron Man band together with more supernaturally inclined folks from around the Marvel Universe, such as Blade, Ghost Rider, and Magick. Included in that group is the Hunter, a fully customizable character you create who is also Lilith's child and the chosen one who can stop her once and for all. But first, let's talk about Midnight Suns' approach to tactical combat. Back when it first started showing off the game, Firaxis revealed that it uses card-based deck-building mechanics for its battle system. Each character in your combat team of 3 has a handful of cards that represent their abilities, and when you start your turn in a battle, you draw a hand of random cards. You can play a set number of cards per turn, so which ones you draw determine what your characters can do. It's a system that seems drastically different from the tactical approach that XCOM players are used to. In the XCOM games, each character you use has a set of actions or abilities they can use each turn, but each of those abilities has a percentage attached to it that tells you its chances of hitting or missing. As creative director Jake Solomon explained during our play session though, the idea of characters missing their attacks or their attacks having a chance to do low damage broke the fantasy of controlling an awesome superhero team. But some degree of randomness is essential for making tactical games fun and unpredictable. Firaxis' solution was to move that randomness to character abilities, forcing you to think carefully about which cards to play, when, and in what order to maximize your team's effectiveness. Your abilities come with a lot of caveats and additional effects, making team synergy and careful planning extremely important. For instance, some attack cards come with the knockback effect, where the enemy you hit can be sent flying. If you crash them into an object, you can deal extra damage, send them into another character, and you can hurt them both. Quick attacks give you an extra card play in your turn if you kill the enemy you're attacking. Since you can only play 3 cards in a turn, having quick cards can extend your actions significantly. You also need to think about which enemies you target, since your cards will automatically move your characters around the battlefield, which is sometimes essential to keeping them out of harm's way from a coming attack or effect. Playing cards also builds up a resource called heroism, which is another key element of your planning. Your more powerful cards require you to spend heroism to use them. So you want to build up your stock for those big moments, where you can do things like drive Ghost Rider's bike through multiple enemies or bombard the battlefield with Iron Man's missiles. But you can also use heroism without cards. Spending heroism can allow your characters to interact with the environment, like throwing a rock at an enemy or blowing up an explosive barrel. If you've got enough heroism, the environment can give you what are essentially additional attack opportunities. It all works together to create a different tactical feel from XCOM. Thinking through your options and abilities is often about clearing out as many enemies as you can in one go, or knocking out the enemies, focusing their attacks on one of your squad members in order to reduce the amount of damage they'll take next turn. You need to think about controlling your positioning, clearing out important enemy threats, building heroism to execute big abilities, and more. It creates a puzzle that is similar to XCOM, but also feels completely different in the moment. The card system introduces randomness into battles that makes them feel variable and interesting. Decks are relatively small and easily tuned, and you have the opportunity to redraw specific cards each turn, so you never feel like you're getting beaten by a bad hand from the RNG. The characters you bring into fights also add a lot of variety to your tactical considerations because of their different abilities and roles. Blade, for instance, is a damage-focused character, great for taking out tough enemies because he can inflict the bleed status effect that causes them to lose health over time. Doctor Strange can boost his teammates, and in so doing, his attacks become more powerful. You can also adjust each character's deck as you earn more cards through Midnight Suns' crafting system, allowing you to focus on specific aspects of their abilities. But each character's deck never has more than about 8 cards in it, so it never gets too complicated. Firaxis also made a big deal of the Hunter. The Hunter has a variety of abilities that span from straight damage dealing to support and healing, as well as an alignment meter that ranges from light to dark. The Hunter's alignment changes depending on the cards you play. Support cards tend to be light, damage cards tend to be dark, which changes their effectiveness. So the character reacts to how you tune your Hunter's deck and according to your playstyle, becoming more powerful in your dedicated area. And if you choose to generalize, taking on abilities from all over the spectrum, your alignment reflects that too. The alignment system isn't just about battles and cards though. It's an RPG system that keeps track of your choices in dialogue as you work through the story and interact with members of your team as the Hunter. And there's a surprisingly huge amount of dialogue to work with. Midnight Suns tracks the flow of time in a way that's similar to XCOM, limiting the actions you can take during each in-game day. At the start of a day, you wake up in the Abbey, the Midnight Suns base of operations, where you can run around, having conversations with characters, chasing down collectibles and advancing story beats, and interacting with the crafting system that can earn you new cards. At some point, you'll eventually pick a combat mission to take on. The further in the game you get, like XCOM, the more missions become available, and you can choose to take on key story battles or go after more generic ones that offer resources you might need. After your mission for the day, you return to the Abbey at night, where more story unfolds. In fact, a huge part of the 5 hours we played were dedicated to walking around as the Hunter in the Abbey, learning about the various elements of the game. There are a lot of tutorials strung together as part of the narrative in the early part of the game, as Midnight Suns gives you the lowdown on combat, dialogue mechanics, team building elements such as training to boost your card's effectiveness, crafting, and more. But the game doesn't seem to have more systems than you'd expect from, say, the base building side of XCOM. What was surprising was how much of those tutorials are built into the storytelling and character interaction. During the session, Solomon said that the Midnight Suns team kept finding that they wanted to spend more time with the characters. The draw for them was as much about the personalities of the superheroes and their friendships and rivalries as it was about using them in battle, alongside conversations you can have with characters as the story progresses, which come with a variety of dialogue options. The nighttime portions of each day give you opportunities to hang out with one specific character. All that time with your team plays into the friendship system, which allows you to unlock better ability cards and more synergy with your teammates based on how close your relationship with them is. It incentivizes hanging around with the other superheroes as well as learning about them. Blade, for instance, isn't a fan of your snarky jokes, while Magick appreciates it if you can relate to the darker elements of her past. Firaxis said the dialogue options won't change the flow of the narrative, but it definitely will affect your relationships with different characters, and you can only choose one character to hang out with for a given day. So your choices for dealing with other characters affect both how your particular story plays out, as you learn more about each person and some heroes more than others, and how your team functions in battle. The tone feels a bit more in line with something like the Avengers films or the Guardians of the Galaxy, with plenty of quips and humor between the characters and tons of references to the Marvel Universe.
Tony, that's Carol and Dr. Spooky over there, here to help.
Somewhat coincidentally, the game's story actually has a lot in common with the recently released movie, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, despite Firaxis beginning the development of its tale some 5 years ago. Expect to see a big cross-section of the Marvel Universe take part in the game as well. The portion we played included missions with Spider-Man on the team, fighting a demonic version of Venom who had been possessed by Lilith. Marvel's Midnight Suns was surprising in that while it looks a bit like the XCOM games, it tends to feel drastically different from them. It's also a major departure from Firaxis' usual offerings, with an increased focus on storytelling and RPG elements that go far beyond the combat at its center. But while Midnight Suns is a little out of Firaxis' wheelhouse, it was also fun to play. Its battle system puts a big spin on the underlying ideas of tactical turn-based combat that also feels more approachable than the slightly more hardcore focus of XCOM. Although we also saw that Midnight Suns will offer a bunch of high difficulty options so you can really challenge yourself. And its storytelling, though dense, puts a lot of emphasis on a group of deep and interesting characters. Over the course of 60 hours, it seems there will be a whole lot to explore in Midnight Suns, and from what we've seen so far, uncovering secrets Building relationships and mastering combat mechanics are going to be rewarding for strategy and RPG fans alike.
How about I take Eddie here for his afternoon walk? Don't worry, Doc. That's just his way of saying he cares!